Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another market analysis for the month of July. Now, this week we had a really important update come to the game, one that had the potential to really affect the economy in most likely a positive way. Now, I am talking about combat achievements. A huge list of tasks all requiring different combat skills, items, and high-end gear really had the opportunity to push a lot of prices upwards, but did it? Today, I want to primarily look at how that update affected the economy, whether it reversed this giant downward trend we've been seeing for almost a year now. As always, I'll also be covering anything else interesting in the old school RuneScape economy this month. As always, guys, don't forget to like the video. Last episode, I got a really awesome explosion video effects pack. Now that I've incorporated my business, I have to start reinvesting into stuff, so yeah, we got that. So like the video and you'll get more explosions. Anyway, guys, let's get started. Now, combat achievements is a really interesting update when it comes to the economy, and that's because it is a very broad PVM update. It is an incredibly challenging PVM update. However, for most of the challenges, there is no one way to do them, so in the majority of cases, there isn't a specific item you need to use, but in general, most of the challenges do require very high-end gear. Now, because this was such a broad PVM update, how exactly did this affect the economy? Well, I think a really good item to illustrate that is actually the Dragon Hunter Lance, because many items share a very similar trend. Pretty much from May until the beginning of July, most PVM items were crashing incredibly quickly. Now, sometime around the beginning of July, the release date for combat achievements was announced, and that trend reversed very quickly. Now, the prices peaked on the 11th, that is when combat achievements came out, and then after a few days, it plateaued. So in the case of the Dragon Hunter Lance, while it did not really reverse the price trend so much, it's not shooting upwards, it has kind of stopped the bleeding a bit. A very similar trend on the Dragon Hunter Crossbow, although that one actually does seem to be trending upwards a bit. Another general item here is the Bandos Chestplate, pretty similar trend. From May to the beginning of July, prices were plummeting, however combat achievements kind of reversed that and then it hit a plateau. Now, while that's not as noticeable of an effect as one might assume such a big PVM update would cause, it's still something and it's still positive. Now, while for the majority of items, combat achievements did not cause a giant price surge, there are a few that were affected more heavily. Probably one of the bigger ones is actually the Harmonized Orb. From May through till the beginning of July, the Harmonized Orb fell from 900 mil down to 750 mil. However, as soon as the release date for combat achievements was announced, the price shot up and has continued to trend upwards. This is actually looking very promising for the Harmonized Orb. Most likely the Harmonized Orb is being affected a bit more, mainly because it is one of the highest DPS mage items in the game and most likely required to complete some of the Master and Grandmaster tasks, in combination with the Harmonized Orb being very rare, so the price is more likely to be affected. Now, another item that has been, in my opinion, very positively affected by combat achievements is actually Justiciar. Now, it turns out with a lot of the new achievement tasks, quite a few of them require you to take no damage, or tank no hits, or some variant of that, and Justiciar is a very defensive piece of armor, and I think a lot of players are actually buying it up. So bottomed out on July 1st, started to increase for combat achievements. Now when combat achievements were released, it did drop a little bit, but now we're already back up to like 35 mil again, which means it's nearly recovered from this giant dip caused by. Another item that does seem to be trending upwards is the new Bow of Verdinin. When combat achievements was released, it was worth 144 mil, and now it's worth 165 mil. For players who are looking to actually complete some of the higher end bits of the achievement diary, I think the Bow of Verdinin is a much more accessible piece of gear. For those who can't afford a twisted bow, the Bow of Verdinin, the Dragon Hunter Crossbow are both going to be good options to complete a lot of the tasks, so I really do think that is jumping up the price. Now, another item I think was greatly affected by combat achievements is the Blood Shard. There was a lot of speculation in this item, including myself. Quite a few of the combat achievements require you to get a certain amount of kills without leaving the room, without drinking a prayer potion, without leaving the wilderness, something like that. And a lot of players speculated that the Blood Shard would be incredibly useful, has a lot of extra sustain built into it, and defensive stats. And while it did jump up a lot from May until combat achievements, it really doesn't seem like that many people bought them, mainly just investors. Now on the flip side, there were some items I don't think were really affected much at all. While the Twisted Bow did have a fairly similar trend, peaking on July 11th once again, it is actually just continuing to fall, pretty much right back to where it was before and probably going to continue to fall. There are maybe some other factors here like the Bow of Verdinin, but combat achievements didn't do very much for the Twisted Bow. Another good example is the Scythe. While the site once again followed a very similar trend, pretty much all PVM items jumped up from July 3rd until the 11th. The update dropped and well, so did the price of the site, already back to around 450 mil again. Again, potentially just a very small blip on the radar of a very long and brutal decline. And again, kind of a very similar trend on the Elysian. So combat achievements, did it help? Well, I would say yes. I would say it did stimulate the PVM economy a bit, but not as much as one would assume. And I think the main reason why is a lot of players were not really viewing combat achievements as an achievement diary or as something like the collection log. I think a lot of players viewed it as a shiny new piece of content with new rewards and something that a lot of people would end up doing. But that's not really the case, and I think the adoption rate of players actually completing combat achievements is probably kind of low. Sure, some players might do some of the easier diaries, but the higher end ones are very difficult and the rewards are very minimal. It's mostly just for status, for cosmetic rewards, and for completionists. And while personally I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but unfortunately it really will just not have a big push on the economy like a new boss, a new raid, or a giant new PVM update would. And that is the main reason why I think we're seeing a bit of a lukewarm result so far. That could change. For example, Jagex could decide they want to add in some new rewards. There's a fair bit of pushback from the community right now, so that could happen. And I do think combat achievements will have a fairly sustained long-term benefit on the economy, but it's not going to be very noticeable in general. Now, forgetting about PVM items for a second here, one thing I haven't actually looked at for a long time are some resource items, and there are some really interesting things going on, especially in the fish market. Now, this has kind of been happening very subtly in the background, but sharks are worth nearly 1,000 GP each again. And pretty much for all of 2021, sharks have been going up in price. And that is very interesting because when you compare that to a lot of other resource items, they are continuing to tank. Just for example, if we look at dragon bones, quite a different story. And it's not just sharks. If we look at anglerfish as well, anglerfish are on a giant upward trend ever since March. Pretty well doubling in price, going from 1,000 up to 2,000 now almost. If we look at manta rays, a similar thing is going on there. Going from 1,000 up to 1,600 in the last 3 or 4 months. And finally here we have dark crabs, not as pronounced, but they are going up ever since March. Now there are a couple reasons that this could be the case. Bots are for whatever reason being tackled specifically at this spot, or just in general, Jagex has been having a heavier hand when it comes to bots. I think there is some evidence to suggest that could be the case. Combat achievements could be partially responsible, but I would say that might be a little bit unlikely as the trend had started well before combat achievements was really on the radar for most people. Now I find that really interesting because most other resource gathering skills are not doing that well. For example, we have red chinchompas, which are at a very low point of 855 GP each. Incredibly cheap. So let me know what you guys think about that down below. Now, one thing I saw mentioned kind of recently that I thought was interesting was touching on league items. Now, if you guys remember back to the Twisted League, after all the items were released, they actually held a very significant value and for quite a while, and that was mainly to do with the fact that not as many people played Twisted League as players that played the newer one, Trailblazer. Now, because Trailblazer League points and Twisted League points are interchangeable, you can buy either rewards with them, the price of the Twisted League items have crashed so hard. I'm not even sure if I've touched on this already, but here we have the Twisted Blueprint worth around 900k, and it's slowly been going down over the last couple of months. However, look how much it was worth before Trailblazer League came out. It was worth 25 mil, and then pretty much overnight, immediately crashed down to around 2 mil, and now is worth 900k. That's insane. And pretty much the same thing happened with the Twisted Horn. The Twisted Horn was incredibly valuable before Trailblazer League came out, peaking at around 23 mil before the league came out. Now I bring this up mainly just as a advisory or warning that going forward, I don't think any league items are really going to hold much value because points are starting to stack up. I think a lot of players have a lot of points left from Trailblazer League, and you could feasibly spend those on new rewards without even participating in the league. I know quite a few people who lost a lot of money investing in league rewards, and it's not hard to see why. Now finally here, as always, I'd like to touch on the old school RuneScape bond. Now GE Tracker just recently updated with the historical data for all of the items, so we can see all the way back to 2017 for the old school RuneScape bond. As always, GE Tracker is a sponsor of mine. They've been supporting me for a long time. They also have a ton of useful tools on their website for market analysis, so I'd highly recommend checking them out with the link in my description. Now recently bonds have kind of stagnated, and I'm really interested to see what happens going forward. Generally in the winter, bonds will peak. However, this year is kind of interesting. There is some talk that there may actually be a bit of gold deflation in the market. Now, because of the removal of the Revenant Cave and a few other things like it, bots have been more heavily focused on farming PVM drops. So instead of injecting direct cash into the economy, they're injecting items. So because of that, it's possible that the value of gold pieces in RuneScape might be going up relative to the price of items. Generally, the price of bonds are continuing to go up, mainly because more and more gold is getting pumped into the RuneScape economy, which is inflating the price of gold in relation to fiat currencies like the US dollar, Canadian dollar, wherever you're from. So if this year there's some gold deflation, or it's just at the very least not inflating, maybe bonds will not actually peak at such a high price. I'm very interested to know. Pretty much for all of 2021, the prices really have not moved much. So we'll know by the winter if anything really has changed. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for July's market analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, let me know if you have anything you want to discuss down below. I do always read all of my comments, so if you leave it, I will at least read it. Thanks for watching guys, as always, and I will see you next time. Now before I go here, as always, I'd love to thank all of my members over on YouTube. A giant thank you to Guy Fox, Ocelot, Timothy Chen, Wolf of the Hunt, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed at the Dragon tier membership. You guys are awesome as always, really appreciate it. Also a giant thank you to Mexos, Branton Graffin, Hunter Durant, Yo-Yo Sub 89, Lord Dojin, Connor B, Birdbot, and Base Titch. And of course, thank you to all of my other YouTube members as well. If you guys are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do so. Get immortalized in all of my future videos, get access to my video release schedule, and of course, get a custom role in my Discord server. Thanks again guys as always, and I'll see you next time.